This building closed as a school in 1936. And when you see pictures of it from the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, there isn't a speck of paint on it. And everybody's still surprised that it actually is still standing and actually kind of waited for us to come to our senses, if you will, and save the building. And over the last 5 years, we've raised about, well, now with the Save America's Treasures program, about close to $2 million. But the preservation of a 4-story wood structure at 6,200 feet in Virginia City in this climate is incredibly daunting. And it has taken 12 years to get to the point we're at right now. Right now we're undergoing a $1.5 million restoration, which includes a new roof, the restoration of all 88 windows, which involves literally taking all of those windows out, bringing them to Reno, having them restored, brought back, the weights taken out of the walls, reinserted, reattached, and that's just one component of this restoration project. And so it's not really an adaptive reuse per se, it's really a restoration and rehabilitation of the building. We actually had a historic preservation architect and some conservators come in who are experts in the field and nationally recognized, come in and do an assessment of this facility before we started any adaptive reuse, before we really got too far in the interior of the building and destroyed some of the integral components of it. And through that process, we decided to have a different interpretation plan and to interpret the building from its origin of 1876 to 1936. Through that also, we hired a preservation architect out of San Diego who had an extensive experience and expertise in preservation projects. And we worked with his firm, and the Savannah College of Art and Design from Savannah, Georgia, on Historic Structures Report, which tells you at least partially the architectural history of the building and what components need to be preserved at all costs, which components are less important than others in the building. So when we go into the interior of the building, we know what to remain, what to leave intact, what not to leave intact. For this project, we also did a paint analysis. You take pieces of the building, components of the building, and we sent them to the labs in Savannah where they do, through microscopic means and also through laser means, they actually go through and tell you every piece or every component, every fabric that had ever been put on that piece of the building. And by doing that process, we've come up with the original color scheme that the building had. Our research shows us that these original color schemes probably haven't been on the building since the mid-1800s. And so we're real excited about the fact that the building is going to look just like it had, although with 125 years of wear and tear, as it was designed to look in 1876. And that's the level of effort we're going to in trying to preserve this facility. So when people come in here in years from now and 100 years from now, they will understand the philosophy we had. We're not trying to make it new and improved. We're not restoring things to their original state. We're keeping the patina, the wear and tear on the floors, things of that nature, because that is integral to the story of this building. It will not look like it did in 1876, but throughout the building we will show and illustrate what it would have looked at 1876 through that 1936 time capsule. I think what's so powerful about historic structures compared to photographs, because of their sheer size, because you can walk into them literally, you have a more powerful experience. You can touch it, you can smell it, you can scratch it, you can sniff it. There's a much more powerful experience and interaction you can have with a facility such as this. And we're just stewards. We have whatever chapter this is in the preservation of this building. We're just going to hand it off to the next generation. And that's why we involve 8th grade students and the high school students in the design of our websites and our docent program, things of that nature, because those people are the people that will become the next stewards. And because of such a transient society, I think that we're all tourists, in a sense. We're all travelers. And so even people who live in Reno now, or who live in Carson City, or live up in Virginia City, many of them came from somewhere else. And this is a place, the Fourth Ward School, other historic structures and sites throughout the state, where people can come to learn about this new land in which they, now call home. In addition to preserving the building as an artifact, in addition to that restoration project, we also try to keep the programs of the Fourth Ward School moving. They're always a step or so a little bit behind because the building has to exist in order for the programs to exist and have a place to call home. One of the programs we have is obviously our collections. And through the State Historic Records Advisory Board, we received grant monies to begin the inventory process and the preservation projects of the artifacts. Both those artifacts that are original to the building, and also the photos and things and documents that have been collected over the years by the Virginia City Alumni Association, which uses this facility as their stopping point or starting point, if you will, for their collections. And our own, we have begun the inventory process, and over this last 6 months especially, over 640 desks have been inventoried and sorted by primary school grades, the little tykes, all the way up to the high school age, which is what this building held, those grades. Eventually those will be sorted and they'll be put into specific rooms which will become our exhibit spaces and our living history programs. But the other process that we're involved in through other grants that we've received is we're beginning to take those photos that have been inventoried, and we started the scanning process. Eventually all the photos, and the goal is by May of 2000 we'll actually have created a Fourth Ward School library card, probably for the first time. And people will be able to come in to our Resource Center, and Resource Center is a loose term right now. Eventually we'll have a specific year-round facility that people will be able to come into, but for the interim, at least in May, people will be able to come into and scan and review and research all the collections that heretofore have not been available to the public. The long-term goal is there's been oral histories done by the University of Nevada, Reno, by our own volunteers and consultants. We want those to be available over the website, over the internet, as they come into the Resource Center. So 100 years from now, people can come in and hear from their father, their great-grandfather, their uncle who went to school here, or who actually just lived up on the Comstock and has stories to tell. They'll be able to interact with those photos, with those documents, the cemetery tours, the history of C Street businesses. Those are things that people have done extensive amount of research on that will be available here. Our history defines who we are. And if we don't have those markers, I think that we simply don't have a sense of place. We don't have a sense of ourselves. As far as taking care of your own family heirlooms and photos, documents of that nature, I mean, that's part of the mission of the Nevada State Museum. The Nevada Historical Society, the State Archives in Carson is a great resource. There's a lot of resources in the state where you can simply call them up and say, hey, I have this, artifact, this photograph. How do I best handle it? How do I best deal with it? Get to it soon, rather than wait. If it's starting to, fade, a photograph, things of that nature, with the new technology, with CDs, with DVD, with all those different things that people toss around, they're great ways to save it, so that in another 100 years, the next line of family will be able to enjoy it.